Imagine making $250,000 a year, living in this beautiful suburban home, driving a luxury car, and still feeling this low-grade panic every single time you look at your checking account.
Yeah, because you are secretly living paycheck to paycheck.
Exactly. I mean, it sounds entirely contradictory, right?
Yeah.
But for millions of highly educated professionals, it's this terrifying daily reality. You can earn an absolute fortune, but if you don't understand the mechanical flow of money, you just remain completely trapped.
And that paradox is the exact reason why financial literacy is fundamentally different from, like, academic intelligence. You can hold a PhD or be this brilliant surgeon and still make just catastrophic errors with your capital.
Mostly because the underlying rules of money are, well, they're rarely taught in formal education.
Right, they just aren't. Which brings us to the core of today's deep dive.
Yes, we are taking a comprehensive, totally unvarnished look into one of the most famous and probably the most polarizing personal finance books ever printed. I'm talking about Robert Kiyosaki's 1997 juggernaut, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, yeah. It's a title that completely altered the cultural landscape of personal finance. I mean, we're talking about 32 million copies sold, translated into 51 different languages. The cultural imprint is massive.
It really is. And to truly dissect that impact, we are pulling from a massive, incredibly diverse stack of sources today.
We really are. On one side, we have these glowing summaries and endorsements from high-income financial bloggers.
Yeah, specifically the debt-free doctor and the white coat investor.
Exactly. Along with countless real estate syndicators who basically view this book as their origin story. But then on the other side, we're looking at blistering critiques from traditional finance experts.
Plus scathing one-star Goodreads reviews, CBC Marketplace investigations, and even some Getty Images archives from 2006.
Right, the ones showing Kiyosaki holding press briefings at Trump Tower to launch a co-authored book with Donald Trump.
Yeah, the material really covers the absolute extremes of public opinion, from people who literally credit the book with their entire net worth to those who view it as just a predatory marketing funnel.
So our mission for you today is to slice straight through both the immense hype and that fierce criticism. We want to extract the actual actionable nuggets of financial wisdom that resonated with tens of millions of readers.
But simultaneously, we're going to objectively examine the specific mechanical reasons why so many financial experts consider Kiyosaki's advice to be vague, highly condescending, and, in some market conditions, financially catastrophic. Okay, let's unpack this. How did a self-published book about a seemingly fictional rich dad fundamentally rewire how an entire generation views the concept of a day job?
Well, the entire philosophy really hinges on a single paradigm shift. Kiyosaki calls it rule number 1.
And he insists it's the only rule you actually need to master. Right?
Exactly. You must know the explicit difference between an asset and a liability.
Which sounds simple, but in standard corporate accounting, the definition of an asset can be quite complex.
Oh, absolutely. It involves depreciation schedules and intangible goodwill and all that. But Kiyosaki throws all of that out and just distills it down to cash flow.
Right. So an asset is simply something that puts money into your pocket, whether you are working or not.
And a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket.
Our source from the debt-free doctor uses a really brilliant visual for this. He describes investing as acquiring a battalion of little soldiers.
I love that analogy.
Right. Every dollar you put into the asset column is a soldier that marches out into the economy, works 24 hours a day, and captures more little soldiers to bring back to you.
And the poor and the middle class focus almost entirely on their income statements. Like, they just want to negotiate a higher salary at their job.
But the rich focus obsessively on acquiring those little soldiers. They build their asset columns through real estate, dividend-paying stocks, or intellectual property.
What's fascinating here is how violently that simple redefinition collides with the traditional American dream, specifically when it comes to homeownership.
Oh boy, yeah. Kiyosaki looks the reader right in the eye and declares that your primary residence is not an asset. It is a liability.
And traditional accountants absolutely hate that assertion.
They really do. Because if you have a paid-off house, standard accounting says you have equity, therefore you have an asset on your balance sheet.
But if you apply Kiyosaki's strict cash flow rule, that house requires property taxes, homeowners insurance, a new roof every 20 years, constant maintenance.
It bleeds cash out of your pocket every single month.
Exactly. And the white coat investor source highlights why this specific lesson is so critical for high-income earners.
Like doctors or corporate lawyers, right?
Right. They receive their first massive paycheck and immediately purchase a sprawling dream home. And because their income is high, a bank happily approves a massive mortgage.
Suddenly, their entire monthly cash flow is swallowed by the expenses of maintaining that property. They become completely house poor.
Yeah, having purchased a giant liability under the comforting illusion that it was an investment.
So escaping that trap requires a complete rewiring of how you view consumption. The sources detail this fascinating story about Kiyosaki's wife, Kim, wanting to purchase a 60-foot sailboat,
Which is like the quintessential liability.
a depreciating fiberglass hole in the water that demands docking fees, fuel, and constant upkeep.
Oh, yeah. Most people looking at a multi-$100,000 luxury item would look at their salary and conclude, I cannot afford this.
But Kiyosaki argues that the phrase, "I can't afford it," is a mental poison.
He says it shuts down the brain's problem-solving capacity and just reinforces a mindset of scarcity.
So the alternative is to ask a question instead. How can I afford this?
And Kim actually applied that exact question.
Right. She purchased the boat, but instead of simply docking it for personal use, she placed it into a commercial charter company in Hawaii.
So whenever they were not sailing it themselves, the boat was rented out to tourists.
The revenue from the charter business covered the loan payments, the docking fees, and the maintenance.
She basically utilized an asset at the charter business to fund the liability.
Essentially getting the luxury item for free.
It perfectly encapsulates the core mechanic of wealth building. You are allowed to enjoy luxuries, but you do not buy them with the wages from your own physical labor.
You build an asset column, and the cash flow from the asset column buys the luxury.
Right. But to successfully build those assets, you must fundamentally change how you interact with the tax code and the employment system.
Well, if the math of turning liabilities into assets is so straightforward, we have to ask why so many brilliant, highly educated people failed to do it.
And Kiyosaki illustrates this failure through the central narrative device of the book, the tale of his two dads.
Right. The poor dad was his biological father, a highly credentialed man with a PhD who served as the head of education for the state of Hawaii.
He fiercely believed in the traditional path of going to school, getting stellar grades, and securing a safe corporate or government job with good benefits.
And the contrasting figure is the rich dad, the father of his childhood best friend, Mike.
Who never finished high school, yet he leveraged his street smarts and business acumen to build this massive empire of convenience stores, restaurants, and real estate in Hawaii.
He viewed traditional employment as a trap designed to keep people completely reliant on a paycheck.
The sources recount this wild story where 9-year-old Kiyosaki and his friend try to literally make money by melting down empty lead toothpaste tubes.
To cast counterfeit nickels.
Yeah. And when the rich dad discovers them operating this illegal counterfeiting ring, he decides to teach them how money actually functions.
So he hires them to dust cans in his convenience stores for mere pennies an hour. He intentionally underpays them until they are so frustrated they want to quit.
Purely to force them to feel the visceral anger of being an underpaid employee at the mercy of a boss.
Wait, I struggle with this framing a bit. I mean, my own father was an educated employee with a stable W-2 job and a pension, and he provided a great life for a family.
Sure, absolutely.
Isn't it incredibly risky, maybe even irresponsible, to tell an entire generation of readers to shun traditional education and ditch their stable jobs to start businesses, knowing full well the vast majority of small businesses fail?
That is a highly valid critique, and it's a risk that Kiyosaki frequently glosses over, but he bases his argument on the mechanical, legal reality of how the tax code treats different types of income.
Ah, right, the cash flow quadrant.
Exactly. He divides the working world into 4 categories: E for employee, S for self-employed, B for business owner, and I for investor.
And the reason he pushes people away from that E quadrant is the concept of tax arbitrage.
The structural advantage is just massive. If you are an employee, the government taxes your income before you ever see your paycheck.
Right, you earn $100,000, the government takes $30,000 directly out of payroll, and you are forced to budget your life, your mortgage, and your groceries on the remaining $70,000.
But the B and I quadrants, the business owners and investors, they operate under an entirely reversed formula.
Because they utilize corporate entities like LLCs or S-Corp.
Exactly. A corporation earns $100,000, but before the government takes its cut, the corporation spends money on business expenses.
That can include leasing vehicles, purchasing computer equipment, covering travel, or, paying for health insurance.
So if the corporation spends $80,000 on those expenses, it only pays taxes on the remaining $20,000.
Employees earn, Pay taxes and then spend.
Yeah.
Corporations earn, spend, and then pay taxes on the leftovers.
The tax code is literally written to incentivize business owners and investors because they're the ones providing housing and jobs to the economy.
To take advantage of that, Kiyosaki emphasizes the rule of minding your own business.
And he relies on that famous anecdote about Ray Kroc, the guy who built McDonald's into a global empire.
Right. Kroc was speaking to a group of MBA students at the University of Texas and asked them what business he was in.
The students laughed, assuming it was a joke, and told him he was in the hamburger business.
But Kroc corrected them, stating that his actual business was real estate.
McDonald's is one of the largest single owners of real estate on the planet.
The franchisees are the ones sweating over the grills, selling the hamburgers to generate the cash flow required to pay the lease on the land.
Land that McDonald's corporate owns at the most valuable commercial intersections in the world.
So Ray Kroc's profession was selling burger franchises, but his asset column, his actual business, was real estate.
And separating your profession from your business is a profound conceptual leap. But understanding the theory of corporate tax structures and cash flowing real estate is very different from executing it in the real world.
Which is exactly where things get messy. Here's where it gets really interesting. You see a book that has sold 32 million copies, and you might assume the financial community universally applauds it.
Oh, but diving into the critical sources reveals a completely different reality.
Traditional finance experts, consumer protection advocates, and real estate veterans have systemically dismantled Kiyosaki's specific advice over the last 2 decades.
For instance, real estate expert John T. Reed published this exhaustively detailed critique that has become legendary in financial circles.
Reed argues that Kiyosaki frequently butchers basic legal and accounting principles.
Yeah, recommending strategies that are not just mechanically flawed, but legally dangerous if implemented improperly.
A glaring example of this danger became incredibly obvious during the lead-up to the 2008 financial crisis.
The sources show that in the mid-2000s, Kiyosaki was loudly advocating for highly speculative tactics, particularly zero-down real estate investing.
And the mechanism here is critical. Zero down means you buy a property using entirely borrowed money, putting none of your own capital at risk.
Banking on the idea that the rental income will cover the massive loan payments.
The extreme leverage works beautifully in a rapidly appreciating market. But as we know, leverage is a double-edged sword.
Oh, yeah. When the housing market crashed in 2008, property values plummeted below the loan amounts, creating massive negative equity.
Simultaneously, renters lost their jobs and stopped paying rent. The cash flow dried up instantly.
But the massive mortgage payments were still due. Readers who followed the zero-down philosophy literally lost everything to foreclosure because they had no equity cushion to absorb the shock.
Wow. And beyond the mechanical dangers, the sources highlight a deep lack of transparency regarding Kiyosaki's own background.
Right, it is widely suspected, and Kiyosaki has occasionally admitted that the rich dad character is likely entirely fabricated, or at best, a composite of multiple people.
Which completely undermines the true story marketing angle that made the book so compelling in the first place.
Furthermore, an investigation by CBC's Marketplace exposed the dark side of the Rich Dad's seminar ecosystem.
Right, the book often serves as a top-of-funnel marketing tool, funneling inspired readers into these free hotel seminars.
Which then utilize aggressive pressure tactics to upsell them into advanced training packages costing upwards of $45,000.
The Marketplace investigation revealed that many attendees took on massive credit card debt to pay for these seminars, receiving very little actionable real estate education in return.
It's rough. We also found a fierce sociopolitical critique running through the Goodreads reviews.
Yeah, and to remain completely impartial, we are not taking a side on the politics here, but it is crucial to report why the tone alienates so many readers.
Thousands of reviewers point out a heavy libertarian slant.
Kiyosaki frequently uses language that is intensely condescending to the working class. He repeatedly labels people who rely on a W-2 paycheck as losers stuck in a rat race.
And the critics argue that this framing is deeply reductive. It completely ignores the complexities of systemic poverty, lack of access to capital, and structural inequality.
By implying the financial struggle is purely the result of laziness or fear, the book dismisses the reality that not everyone is starting from the same baseline of opportunity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the portrait that emerges from the critical sources is that Robert Kiyosaki is a masterful marketer.
Those 2006 Getty images of him at Trump Tower, capitalizing on the reality TV fame of Donald Trump to launch a co-authored book, perfectly encapsulate his brand.
He knows exactly how to generate controversy, tap into financial anxiety, and sell a lifestyle. The fundamental danger occurs when vulnerable readers mistake a high-level motivational tool for a literal step-by-step instruction manual.
That distinction is paramount. When desperate people attempt to replicate vague, highly leveraged real estate deals without adequate capital reserves or legal counsel, they get financially slaughtered.
But the reviewers who still aggressively defend the book, like the authors over at the White Coat Investor, make a compelling counterargument.
They argue that if you strip away the questionable real estate mechanics, the predatory seminar upsells, and that abrasive political tone,
The remaining core of the book is an exceptionally potent psychological framework for handling money.
and the psychological framework is precisely where the book delivers its true value.
Kiyosaki argues that the primary difference between a wealthy individual and a poor individual is not their intellect or even their starting capital. It is how they process and manage fear.
He actually identifies 5 specific psychological roadblocks to financial independence.
The first roadblock is fear itself, specifically the paralyzing terror of losing money.
Traditional advice says to put your money in a savings account because it is safe.
But with inflation, a low-yield savings account is mathematically guaranteed to lose purchasing power over time.
So the fear of volatility causes people to avoid investing entirely, which guarantees they will never build an asset column.
Right. Then the second roadblock is cynicism. This manifests as the noise from the world around you.
It's the friend who confidently declares the stock market is rigged, or the family member who insists a housing crash is imminent every single year.
Cynicism sounds like intelligence because it is inherently cautious, but it ultimately paralyzes you into inaction.
The third roadblock is laziness, and Kiyosaki offers a highly controversial cure for laziness: a healthy dose of greed.
Yeah, when you face a financial obstacle, laziness is defaulting to the phrase, "I can't afford it," because it requires zero mental effort.
But greed, channeled constructively, forces you to sit down with a spreadsheet and figure out how to increase your value to the market so you can afford it.
The fourth roadblock centers on bad habits, specifically the mechanical habit of cash flow.
Most people receive their paycheck and immediately pay everyone else: the landlord, the utility company, the auto lender.
If there is anything left over, they might save it. But Kiyosaki advocates for the habit of paying yourself first.
You automatically route capital into your asset column before any bills are paid.
And the resulting financial pressure of needing to cover your living expenses forces you to hustle, innovate, and generate additional income.
The final roadblock is arrogance. He defines arrogance as the toxic combination of ego and ignorance.
This is particularly dangerous for highly educated people. A brilliant software engineer might assume that because they are a genius at coding, they automatically understand market dynamics.
They let their ego blind them to their own financial ignorance, leading to catastrophic investment decisions.
This ties directly into Kiyosaki's philosophy on skill acquisition. He famously advises readers to work to learn, not to earn.
Do not take a job merely for the salary. Take a job for the specific skills it forces you to develop.
There is a vivid anecdote in the sources that drives this home. Kiyosaki is interviewed by a highly talented young journalist who is deeply frustrated because her novels are not selling.
She is struggling to pay her rent despite her obvious writing talent. So Kiyosaki bluntly advises her to enroll in a sales and marketing course.
And the journalist is deeply offended. She views herself as an artist and views salesmanship as a sleazy beneath her profession.
Kiyosaki's response is brutal but effective. He holds up one of his own books and points to the cover.
He tells her, "I am a best-selling author. I am not a best-writing author."
Wow. The harsh truth is that her specialized talent was economically useless because she lacked the broader business mechanics required to monetize it.
So what does this all mean? We are looking at a book that tells you to aggressively buy assets instead of liabilities, but provides no safe mechanical map for how to do it.
We have a narrative built around a potentially fabricated mentor promoting real estate strategies that wiped people out in 2008.
Yet, simultaneously, it delivers undeniable paradigm-shifting truth about tax arbitrage and the psychology of fear.
This raises an important question then. If the specific investing mechanics are flawed, is the psychological framework enough to justify its status as the most popular personal finance book in history?
Well, synthesizing all of our sources, the conclusion is that the book's lasting power lies in its ability to violently shake readers out of a scarcity mindset.
The scarcity mindset operates on the belief that the economic pie is fixed. If I want a larger slice, I must take it from you, which breeds fear, hoarding, and hyper-caution.
But the book transitions the reader into an abundance mindset. It proves that wealth is not a fixed pie. It can be created through leverage, corporate structures, and providing value to the market.
It forces you to view a $100 bill not as a ticket to consume a nice dinner, but as a seed that can be planted, grown, and harvested for decades.
That cognitive shift is profoundly powerful. Once you truly internalize the difference between an asset and a liability, you can never look at a car loan, a mortgage, or a credit card statement the same way again.
Rich Dad Poor Dad is ultimately a masterclass in paradox. It blends genuinely life-altering financial concepts with highly aggressive, often dangerous leverage tactics, all wrapped in brilliant marketing.
It teaches that true financial literacy, like a deep, functional understanding of accounting, markets, the tax code, and the law, is the only reliable vehicle to stop trading your physical labor for wages.
You really have to approach the book like a buffet. You take the high-level concepts regarding cash flow and tax strategy, and you firmly leave the dangerous leverage and seminar upsells on the table.
And that is the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener. The traditional education system is not designed to teach you how to build wealth. It is designed to teach you how to be a functional employee.
The responsibility to learn the mechanics of money falls entirely on your own shoulders.
You do not have to buy a single piece of real estate, and you certainly shouldn't be forging nickels out of toothpaste tubes.
But if you want to find financial peace, you must stop obsessing over your salary and start systematically building your own asset column.
As you begin assessing your own liabilities and assets, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. It is the ultimate philosophical paradox of the rich dad worldview.
The entire goal of the philosophy is to escape the rat race by acquiring assets and having other people's labor generate your passive income.
But what happens to a macroeconomy if every single person successfully implements this advice?
If we all successfully step out of the rat race to live entirely off investment cash flow, who is left to actually bake the bread, repair the electrical grids, and perform the physical labor that sustains the very assets we are all relying on?
A system built entirely on investors mathematically requires a massive foundation of employees to function. It certainly forces you to look at the economy through a different lens.
It really does. Well, thank you for taking a deep dive with us today. We will catch you in the next one.